We'd like to call the meeting to order. Welcome to the Orleans Citizens Forum Candidates Night. My name is Ed Daly. I'm the president of the Orleans Citizens Forum. For those who are here for the first time, each year we conduct this meeting when we have a competitive selectmen's race. You can hear the candidates discuss the issues that are important to our town. You will also be invited to directly ask some questions, as will it be explained by our moderator, who will go over the rules for us. Each of these gentlemen have volunteered to be candidates for selectmen. I believe we owe them our respect and admiration for being willing to serve the community for the next 3 years, if elected. Our Orleans Citizens Forum mission is to present forums that affect the quality of life here in Orleans. This forum does just that. One other thing I'd like to mention, if your friends have missed this meeting, it will be rebroadcast on TV on Channel 18, and also it will be, if you go to our website, you can find it on YouTube. There's a direct link for it. I would ask everybody to turn their cell phones off, please. One little more bit of housekeeping is there's restrooms right down the hall on the left, about 25 yards as you go out this door here straight down, so feel free to use them. Next, I'd like to introduce our Orleans Citizens Forum leader, Elizabeth DeLima, our past president, who organized and managed this forum tonight. She will formally introduce our candidates and our moderator. Elizabeth?
There we go. First, a word from our sponsor. I'll bet you that some of you have no clue what the Citizens Forum, the Orleans Citizens Forum, is all about. Sometimes I have those elevator conversations around town and people's eyes glaze over, like, what is that? Just briefly, for those of you who are here for the first time or don't know who we are, we offer, in addition to candidates' nights, 2 or 3 forums on issues of topics that might be of interest to Orleans and perhaps to other towns next to us. For example, in recent years, we've had a forum on the beach buggy people versus the piping plovers. We've had a forum on the epidemic of tick-borne Lyme disease, one on our declining population, also our aging population, and what's in store for Orleans. This last one sowed the seeds of what is now the Orleans Community Partnership, which is doing great work to enhance our village center. And just last week, we had another forum, this one on emergency preparedness, a very timely topic, I think you'll agree. Our forums are free. We're kind of like National Public Radio or public television. You can watch us for free or come here for free, but we run on a shoestring budget, and we ask if you would support us a bit with a mere $15 a year. That's what a membership costs, and those of you who are members aren't sure if you've renewed, our membership chairman is available to check the list. But thank you for those who have paid up, because you help us be here tonight. You can pick up an envelope on the way out and help us. Thanks a lot. Let's see. My next job is, my pleasure is to introduce briefly the selectmen. To my left, Mark Caron, John Fuller, and Alan McLennan Jr. And they, I think, will be much better at telling you all their wonderful things each one of them has done for the town, so I'll let them do that. But in addition, when you go to vote, and I hope you all do, you'll notice that there are 2 other contests going on. One for the Board of Health, Augusta McCusick and Peter O'Meara, and then also 2 for the Nauset Regional Schools Committee, Brian Kavanaugh and Wesley Spiegel. If any of those 4 are here tonight, would you mind standing and be identified? Or wave? Okay. All right. Thank you. I admire all of you who are running for office. It's not a real high-paid job. and it's a lot of hard work. So this town wouldn't run without you. And finally, two gentlemen who are not on the ballot, who'll be working tonight, are timekeepers Bob Summerskill and Chet Crabtree. And they'll be the ones waving paddles to keep everybody within the time limits of our procedure. They're not standing up, I notice. You're not running. Okay. The election is just 3 weeks away on May 21st. And this evening will be an opportunity for you to hear from each of the candidates, their position on various issues, and also for you to ask them questions. And now it's my pleasure to turn the evening over to the person who's in charge, will be in charge of this evening, our moderator, Dwayne Landreth. He's familiar to you perhaps in his role as town moderator, and you may have seen him perform at town meetings. By day, all right. And he actually has this Superman kind of thing. He changes out of that into his Clark Kent suit, and he's a day job as an attorney at Latanzi, Spalding, and Landreth. Over to you, Dwayne.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to see you all here tonight, and good evening, candidates. I'm not sure that term perform is not weighted, but I'll take it as a compliment. I'm going to briefly explain the rules that govern us tonight. We've got two different segments on the program. The first half is general town topics. The second half is wastewater. The approximate time limits of each are 6:30 to 7:30 for the first and 7:30 to 9:15 or so for the second. The format in each segment is that each candidate will give an opening statement on that topic of up to 3 minutes, and we've selected orders for this. The straws were drawn to determine the order of speaking. After the statements, questions will be directed to me for a candidate. Any candidate who takes a question has a 2-minute time to respond. Then either of the other candidates may also speak to that particular question for 2 minutes. At the 7:15 or so, we'll sum up by way of asking the candidates to give a 2-minute closing with regard to the general topics part of the program. At 7:30, when we turn to wastewater, again, we'll hear from each of the candidates for 3 minutes on their opening statements on that topic, and then questions directed to the candidate through the chair. They have 2 minutes to answer and two minutes for rebuttal to each of the other candidates. At the end of that segment, I think 9 o'clock or so, we will close, and each candidate will give a 2-minute sum up on their position. The rules that I want to mention, and there was a handout, I don't know if it was of general circulation, but first, all comments and questions are to be directed to the moderator, and if necessary, I'll repeat the question, or if you holler, I'll repeat the question. Those questions should be in as unfreighted a form as possible. I understand that there are necessarily some value judgments in them, but they should be straight questions. There will be no comments or questions or responses of a personal nature or a derogatory nature. And if there are, then according to the rules, I have the discretion to terminate the question and move on to a new questioner. So I want to keep it civil. The questions by the audience are limited to 1 minute in length, and each person who asks a question may have a follow-up question. Then they have to get back in line with regard to the queue to ask any further questions. The candidate response, as I indicated, is limited to 2 minutes, and then each other candidate has an opportunity to respond. So with that, I will ask that we begin the opening statements, and the order of the opening statements, which has been determined by a logarithmic and algorithmic method. And for this segment, it will be Mr. Fuller, Mr. McClellan, and Mark Karen. So with that, I'll ask the candidates to make their opening statements on the topic, on the general topic.
Thank you, Dewey. Good evening to all. My name is John Fuller. I am the present chairman of the Orleans Board of Selectmen, and I am running for re-election. There are many issues that are of import to Orleans today. A key issue is what is happening at Nauset Beach. Over the past few years, we have suffered extended closures to the oversand trails, both north and south, because of the rulings by the state and federal government on certain seabirds. In addition, there have been some questions about access to these areas for the public, especially to the North Spit, and we have been working with residents to reach an amicable agreement to maintain as free an access as possible. Now there are some new players, seals and sharks. Because of the events in Truro last year, we have put into place new warnings and provide for potential catastrophes to continue the beach's popularity and protect those who use it with the least amount of disruption to the bathing area. This has increased our financial burden in the face of dwindling beach revenues, and the beach is our most significant attraction. We have embarked on a serious campaign to maintain our dated infrastructure. We have created a building maintenance and replacement plan to deal with this issue, which spells out the short and long goals and prioritizes the dedicated funds, starting with the replacement of the elementary school boiler. We have also created a position of project manager to oversee the implementation and completion of each endeavor. Likewise, we have begun to address the replacement of obsolete drainage and stormwater runoff. The voters will be asked to fund a study that will identify all drainage and places that need remediation the most and begin the replacement in FY 214. We have implemented a new Department of Public Works, reorganizing the former structure to be more efficient. A new director, a civil engineer with a professional engineer's license and many years of municipal public works experience has been hired to implement the new structure. We have supported the development of the public-private partnership with the downtown business community and nonprofit groups that are working to make the downtown friendlier to our visitors and residents. The resurrection of the Orleans Community Center is a case in point. We have completed a streetscape and a village center economic study to be implemented as changes occur in the downtown to create a more vibrant business district. We carefully worked with town administration and department heads to produce a budget that provides as much as possible of what the public demands at a reasonable cost, reaching our goal for the tax increase on the town side of the ledger. We have worked hard with the school administrators and school committees to provide sound, award-winning education program while realizing the need to shore up school security to protect our most precious asset. We have created a policy and dedicated funds to deal with the tremendous burden of other post-employment benefits that is haunting every town in the Commonwealth, but still have a great deal of ground to cover. As the last bastion of true democracy in this country, I strongly support the town meeting form of government and its ability to allow every registered resident who chooses to attend the opportunity to affect their own destiny and make a difference in the future of the town. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Thank you. As I begin, I want to tell you that I am honored to be sitting up here. This is the first time in my life that I have ever run for public elective office. I'm trained and have practiced as a professional town planner for most of my life. I believe in and have practiced long-range community planning for my professional career. I believe in local town government and the opportunities town meeting provides for all citizens to participate in the future of this unique town. Our charter sets up a mandate and mandates a clear and vibrant role for long-range planning. We have responded as a community by formally adopting our comprehensive long-range plan in 1999 at our town meeting. We have continually updated our plan and 2 subsequent approvals by town meeting. At the beginning, we received the annual report from our planning board as to progress in attaining our goals, which we have approved. We are one of the communities on Cape Cod that has an approved local comprehensive plan by the Cape Cod Commission. It is consistent with the regional policy plan. Our charter also establishes the clear and precise standards for our capital planning process to ensure that our capital expenditures are carefully programmed. I believe that careful capital planning will allow us to maintain a vibrant and affordable community. We are blessed with a great public education system for all levels, from pre-K to grade 12. Although our recent demographic profile shows us to be an old community, we have consistently supported our education system for the generations of those who will follow us. Our environment is our economy. Without our beaches, the Atlantic Ocean, Cape Cod Bay, Pleasant Bay Estuary, and our freshwater ponds, we would be just another town of 6,000 people. I believe in preserving land for future generations to protect our environment. I am proud of the efforts I have led to preserve land for the future. We have used creative economics by involving the private sector and obtaining the largest grant awards in recent Orleans history. I am proud of my efforts to refinance debt and to save for future activities. I believe in the creation of affordable housing to provide an opportunity for a wide range of people to live in our community. Although we have the highest proportion of affordable housing on Cape Cod, it is skewed disproportionately toward housing for the elderly. I am proud, as Vice Chairman of the town's Community Preservation Committee, we have worked tirelessly to try and create more housing for younger families. 9 new units will come online this year. I have a commitment for the preservation of our historic resources. I believe that we need to prepare a clear capital plan for our precious and valuable recreational facilities. There is no plan. I am proud to have proposed that community preservation funds be used to develop a plan that will guide us to make careful and meaningful expenditures as we seek to preserve and improve these resources. Orleans is very special. I want to give back through my understanding of the municipal planning process I have practiced for most of my life. Thank you.
Good evening. I want to extend a special thanks to the Citizens Forum for holding this evening's Candidates Night and to Mr. Landreth for moderating. I am before you tonight as a candidate for the Board of Selectmen because I want to keep Orleans affordable. I grew up in Eastham and am a graduate from this very building when it was Nauset Regional High School. My mother was able to raise 5 sons alone with the assistance of Aid to Families with Dependent Children, a program I will always be indebted to for assisting our family in being raised on this great peninsula. I was fortunate to have a local business, Cape Cod Bank and Trust Company, believe in me, where I worked for 34 years, advancing upward based on my own resourcefulness, diligence, and skills, retiring as a senior vice president. I have remained in banking as a consultant these past 9 years. In addition, during these years, I purchased and ran a business in Chatham for 5 years and was one of 3 founders and investors to start a local bank. Shortly after getting married and moving to Orleans at the age of 24, I was appointed to the Finance Committee in 1976 and served 9 years. Then I was elected to the original Orleans Charter Commission in 1986 and had the privilege of drafting that document. Other civic undertakings in town have included working on the first Town Hall Building Committee, reinstituting the Orleans Taxpayers Association, recently becoming the chairman of the Orleans Historical Society Board, and last but not least, my 6 years on the Board of Selectmen. My 4 decades of involvement with the town and private business has made me a well-rounded citizen. By staying engaged, I bring a knowledgeable and balanced approach to resolving our issues. Issues like beach erosion, sharks, seals, and let us not forget the plovers. Issues on how to approach our share of the 7-year, $18 million capital plan from the regional school system. That along with our own aging infrastructure of parks, highway, and police facilities for $16 million. Are we adequately funding our health and retirement liability of $44 million? Will the DPW structure have a positive impact on the budget? Or our expiring solid waste contract with CMAS, how much will that increase our user fees? In an hour, we will be talking specifically about wastewater, but I just listed an estimated $64 million worth of debt, and that doesn't include wastewater. We are extremely lucky to live here in Orleans, and it is our responsibility to ensure the next generation has the same opportunities to do so. If I am elected selectman, I will strive to keep Orleans affordable for all. Thank you.
We're now ready for your portion of the meeting. Do I have a question?
Thank you very much, and good evening, and glad to see we have competition this year. And it's a pleasure to live in this town, as you all mentioned. My name is Kevin Galligan from East Orleans. I did prepare some questions so that we move this along because there's a lot to cover. A number of years ago, the Board of Selectmen began the process to terminate membership in the Cape Cod Regional Transportation Authority that was due to FlexBus cost concerns. I frankly am glad that we got over that one, and the FlexBus has turned out to be an incredible success. To all the candidates, through you, Mr. Moderator, what do each of you value most through regional services?
What do each of them value most with respect to regional services? Is that a fair statement? Let's just begin going from this way to that way. Mr. Karen, Mr. Fuller, Mr. McLennan.
Mr. Galligan, I think the county, the services I look to the county for the most are health services that they provide. They're a big assistance to our Board of Health and our health department in helping with immunizations, flu clinics, inspections of our restaurants and services such as that. So I was one, to be honest, that had some concerns over the transportation. At that time, that service was not handling the Orleans residents. It was bringing a lot of residents from other towns through Orleans. And I expressed some concern, and luckily the transportation department did come down with the bus to test, because I wanted the bus route to go east to west, from Skakit to Nauset, because it's difficult for ours, particularly at Tonsett Woods, to utilize that service. I'm not sure that happened after I left the board. I'm not sure where that stands anymore, but I'd like to see better services for our town.
Mr. Fuller.
Well, I look to the county to provide services that we can't really provide ourselves, and that's services like making studies of different issues that concern the whole Cape, regional issues. Now, there are lots of them. Some of them will be discussed in the next segment, but the transportation was one, health's another. Also, the fact that many times we cannot get the services we need here in Orleans unless we ask the county for help. Unfortunately, the county is probably not well funded enough to do this for us, but we should still look to it to help us find ways to keep regional issues alive and keep them moving.
Mr. McLennan.
Yes, thank you. Some of you may know that a year ago I had the honor of serving on a 27-member committee that looked at Barnstable County and what it did and what it might do. I am a person who has spent my life dealing with regional planning issues at the local level, and I am convinced that as the 15 communities on Cape Cod begin to look at dealing with problems that are in some ways insurmountable locally, we need to participate on a regional level. Now, trash was mentioned earlier. We're going to have a regional trash approach to Cape Cod. I think over time we will probably, in some parts of Cape Cod, have a regional approach to wastewater, which we'll talk about later this evening. And I believe that we will see other services, transportation, mosquito control, you name it. The boundaries on Cape Cod were created by man, but Cape Cod is an entity by itself, and we're the last working county in Massachusetts, and that's important, and we should take advantage of it, and I think we do. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Clyde Hanyon, South Orleans. Mr. Moderator, would you ask each of the panelists what the greatest strength which they bring to the office of Selectman might be?
And for this, we'll go from left to right. Mr. McLennan.
Thank you. As I indicated in my opening statement, I have spent my life in local government. Just because it may shock you, I have attended 450 town meeting sessions. Arlington had a history of having 15 town meetings a year, and I attended every single one of them. I understand how local government works. I understand how you deal in the hierarchy of department heads and town administrators and boards of selectmen. Boards of selectmen are the policymakers. They answer and carry out the words and the directions of the town meeting. And I understand that process, and I love it, and I believe that we are unique here in Orleans and in towns in Massachusetts that have an incredibly active and participatory democracy. And as you look at what's happening in the rest of the world, you have to love the way we deal with our own governance. Thank you.
Mr. Fuller. Hold the applause, please. Mr. Fuller.
I have to agree with Mr. McLennan on this one. Having served on the Board of Selectmen for 9 years now, and as I said in my opening statement, I think it's the last bastion of true democracy in this country. Each and every one of you has an opportunity to interact with their government. As was said before, we hire a town administration to operate the town for us, but it's the Board of Selectmen that act for the town meeting and the citizens to set policy for the town. Many places that have representative-type governments, they can say they're going to represent you, but sometimes they don't. Here in Orleans, thanks to the way our charter is set up, when you speak, especially at town meeting, we here as selectmen have to carry out what you say, even if we personally don't agree with what you decide. I truly think that this is the best form of government you can have, and while we're still a small town, we should certainly continue to use it.
Mr. Karen.
Most of you are probably thinking that I'll say my 6 years on the Board of Selectmen. But I really feel my early 9 years on the Finance Committee really prepared me for my other responsibilities as a selectman. The Finance Committee has a unique opportunity, similar to the Board of Selectmen, of really delving into the cost of what it takes to run a municipality. So I will say right off, my years, and I'm currently again serving on the Finance Committee, without a doubt in my mind, has set me up to do the job as selectman. That on top of also being part of the founding group of the Orleans Charter, I think I have a pretty good understanding of how the government is supposed to operate. Now, it's also fair to say that the charter has been reviewed and rewritten to some degree over the last several years since I was on the original one. But I have the financial and the understanding of how government runs, and plus I have my 6 years as a selectman to help me move forward in my next term. Thank you.
Question. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mon Cochran, South Orleans. It's a question on public education. Publicly supported pre-kindergarten services are now a policy priority both at the national and the state levels. I'd like to know, and I'll direct this to Mr. Karen, would you support expansion of pre-kindergarten for 4-year-olds in the Orleans public schools if state funding became available?
Mr. Cochran, let's see, I think one of my brothers was in the Sea Scouts with your father, so it's nice to see you here. I'm not sure why I would not be for that. I've been a big supporter of the school system. I've been a big supporter, and even the Finance Committee had discussions with the Human Services Chair when they came before us about making sure they were giving more money to the after-school program. I'd love to talk to somebody that has some negatives about it, because isn't that only a positive for us? So I'm not sure why I would even question to move forward with that type of proposal.
If you wish to respond, Mr. McLennan, next.
Oh, okay. I would support that. I had the opportunity to visit the elementary school a couple of weeks ago, and it is an exciting place. And we talk about demographics in Orleans, and we need to do whatever we can to try and switch our position from being the oldest community in Massachusetts to something that's more in the middle. And anything that we can do, whether it's short money to manage state-funded pre-K, is exciting to me. We need to do things like that, and we have a small pre-K program now, but these are disadvantaged children who are on educational programs, and the fact that they get to school before kindergarten gives them an opportunity to succeed in our public school system, and that is really important to me. Thank you.
This town has always been supportive of education. I'm a graduate of Nauset High School in 1964, when this was the high school. And I have to say, I can see no reason why we would not support our schools. Most of us have been able to live here because we've had good educations. It's a very expensive place to live sometimes. And we understand that if we don't educate the next generation, then they're not going to be able to live here. They're going to have to live somewhere else. We have the unique opportunity, a great school system, and the support out there to continue to provide education for young people. Pre-K at 4 years old is just another head start for them to succeed in school and move on to better things.
Yes, question there.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Mary Ann Paskowski. I live in East Orleans. I've heard a lot of talk about the demographics. I've heard a little something about early schooling. I would like each of the candidates to respond to how do we get their parents to be able to afford to live and work in this town? I do not see it happening. Thank you.
All right, so let's go institute from right to left. Mr. Karen, Mr. Fuller, and then Mr. Clennon, if you all wish to respond.
I believe that is our toughest challenge. When I look at the demographics, what I'm seeing is a lot of people are selling their homes, sometimes through estates, but they're being purchased by people who are not coming here to be year-round residents. And that concerns me. But I'll tell you something that's greater to me. In the 40 years I've lived here, and remember, I'm a banker. I'm the type of guy that goes out and sometimes repossesses somebody's car because they don't pay, or forecloses on their mortgage because they can't afford their mortgage. But I'm not sure if you all saw about maybe 5 or 6 editions ago in the Cape Codder, the town of Orleans had a list on the Orleans page of 21 homes that we were going to be taking for tax taking. Now, that is a prime alarm for me, indicating that Orleans is now becoming very unaffordable. I'll say it again. 21 homes are going to be taken by the town of Orleans because those residents can't afford the taxes. I do not remember that in the 40 years I have lived here. That is not a very good sign for me. That is also why I listed the $68 million worth of debt that we have looking at us right now without wastewater. We have to sit down and start talking, not just a board of selectmen, but as a community, to find out what we are going to do and how we're going to do it to make the homes that we're talking about, the kindergarten kids, affordable when they graduate, like John and I did from the school.
Mr. Karen, your time is up.
Thank you.
Well,
Mr. Fuller.
I
Excuse me,
think there's
Mr.
another tack to this also. We need to refurbish our downtown businesses and provide working opportunities for young families. That's one thing that seems to be lacking. We don't have a year-round working community. We need to work on that, and by bolstering up our downtown and helping those businesses progress and earn a good living, they'll provide jobs for younger people. That won't eliminate the program. As Mr. Karen pointed out, it's very expensive to live here. Taxes are high, but they're certainly not as high as where most people come from when they move here. And we need to keep them under control, but we also need to provide those services which the townspeople want so we can have the business downtown that's vibrant to provide jobs for those young people and places to live.
Thank you. Some of you know that I came from a town that had the largest decline in population in Massachusetts. And it also had the oldest population when I went there in 1974. It dropped from 53,000 people to 42,000 people because of changing demographics. And we focused during my career there to make a way for young people to move in and live in that town. And I worked through my banking connections and through government agencies to create affordable housing opportunities for people to live in that town. And that is the way that we can turn things around. I agree with John that downtown is critical. We cannot proceed with downtown now because the uses that we'd love to have there, smaller apartments, can't be built because of topic 2 this evening. And I think that's unfortunate. But it becomes part of a focused program, create affordable units, try and create economic opportunities, and a town should be in the business of doing that. And I've done it before, and I'd really like to be able to do it again. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, Allison Jackson, East Orleans. I'm very interested in the issue that Mr. McClellan just brought up in terms of affordable housing for younger people, obviously seniors as well, but specifically for younger people, considering the fact that the demographics of the town are what they are. And I'm curious to find what Mr. Karen and Mr. Fuller's answer to affordable housing, whether they're in favor of it in terms of younger couples, and also perhaps Mr. McClellan could give us a little bit more specifics about how can we as a town actually go about creating more affordable housing for younger people that allows them to raise their families here.
All right. Let's have Mr. Fuller direct that first, answer that question first, and then Mr. Karen and Mr. McClellan if he has anything to add.
As I alluded to in a previous question, a focus downtown for businesses to be able to create affordable housing over their businesses so they can hire people and they can live there is very important to me. I think that's one way. Another way is to continue to look for projects like Habitat for Humanity, the John Hinckley Project, and hopefully be able to get through the regulatory and other problems at a much quicker pace than 8 or 9 years to get these underway. The Habitat for Humanity project was well started and well run and is well underway, and the Hinckley project is nearly done after this long period of time. But we can't stop searching for places for more affordable housing. But again, we can have all the affordable housing for young people that we want. We can provide them schools, but if they don't have jobs here to go to that will pay a decent wage for them to live it's still going to be very difficult for them to live and find housing.
Well, I guess my upbringing certainly hollers out to make sure that the Cape remains affordable. And that to me is number one. As I said in my opening statement, my family would not be here if it was not for assistance. Until the age of 18, we were on that. So I know what it can do, and I know the benefits behind it. But that doesn't make affordable housing any easier. I mean, I was real pleased. Mr. McLennan is on the CPC committee, and last year, they, I think, thought outside the box by pooling funds to help the purchase of the property at Namskakett, which was about $600,000, if I'm correct. I think in order to do this, we have to think outside the box. I think the way we used to do things yesteryear, doesn't work today. So I would encourage collaboration, open discussion, and thinking outside the box.
We have time for one more question. You've had your shot. Oh, excuse me.
Oh, just very quickly, I've been involved in affordable housing and in fact was part of a development team that was going to be the first 40B test case in Massachusetts 35 years ago. But as a community development director and a banker, we created a revolving fund in the town of Arlington of $3 million, and then we worked with the federal government and state government, and by the time we were through, we had revolved that $3 million 10 times and created 88 dwelling units. And I think the opportunity to have partnerships between private banks and the public is really unique. And I would hope, and I've had conversations with the Cape Cod Five about this as well, so I would hope that we could continue to look at that more seriously. Thank you.
Question? Anybody? Is there another question besides?
One over there.
Yes.
Brittany
Excuse me,
Cunningham.
have you already asked a question? I'm sorry.
No.
Oh. Go ahead.
Brittany Cunningham, East Orleans. The Orleans Planning Board is considering new zoning amendments to limit the negative impact of very, very large homes, sometimes called McMansions, in existing neighborhoods that erode Orleans' unique character. Do you support these types of regulations?
Mr. McLennan, then Mr. Fuller, then Mr. Karen.
Mrs. Cunningham, I do. In my prior experience, I drafted a specific amendment in the town of Arlington to deal specifically with that issue. When people move to this town, they're moving because it has a certain character. And it's sad to me when we begin to have things significantly change the neighborhood that people have moved here for. So I would support that.
As you know, that I also am a liaison to the planning board and sat through a few meetings where they discussed this issue, and they discussed it at length. I too support this type of amendment or bylaw, but I also agree with the planning board that some of the details of measurements and things need to be straightened out on how pieces of property are used before we actually put a bylaw out there. And that's why I supported, along with the planning board, of postponing that. The issue is still an important issue, especially here in Orleans, and especially for neighborhoods where a very large home really ruins the decor of the neighborhood. I support it, but I think some details need to be ironed out before we bring it to the public.
Mr. Karen.
I struggle with this one. I struggle because is it fair that I own a lot and all of a sudden I build on that lot, and because I am now cutting out somebody's view, that my house should be smaller? If you look at what's happening in Orleans, there's a house being built in South Orleans, and I may be off a little, but it's 6,000 square feet. One side of me says, wow. The other side of me says, great. You know why? Because he's going to, or she's going to pay a nice little ticket at the end of every May and November. You know, everybody looks at Chatham as an example. You know why Chatham does so well? Because they have Chatham Bars Inn. Chatham Bars has nice, big facilities. They don't vote, and they write a nice, big tax check. So that's why I struggle with it. I struggle because I want to do things in town, and at the same time I want to keep everybody's, if somebody's owned a lot, now I understand, I think at Nauset Heights, this lot was recent, but if I own a lot and then all of a sudden the town starts to change things because of one thing or another, and I do think we have to look at what's going on in the rest of the town. Like I said, this big house in South Orleans, it's overlooking the water right at a point. Nobody even knows it's going on probably. But because of the big facility at Nauset Heights, everybody drives by or walks by going to the beach, which my wife and I do with our dog well, not anymore because you can't go on the beach anymore, but you know, I think we have to make sure we're not just looking at the things that are visible.
Thank you. I will ask the candidates to sum up now on the general topics, and the order is Mr. Karen, Mr. McLennan, and then Mr. Fuller. 2 minutes each.
Well, I'm going to make this real simple. I want to get to the next subject, so I will turn it over to Mr. Fuller.
You're next.
You're giving me 4 minutes, is that it?
If you can fill it,
No,
you can
Mr.
have it.
McLennan, he didn't cede his time to you.
I heard it very carefully. I know exactly. I think that you have heard where I stand on general government. I have spent my life in municipal budgeting. I've done capital budgeting, and at one point in my life, I managed 200,000 square feet of surplus municipal building. And I did that because I persuaded the town they shouldn't sell them, because once you sell municipal property, you lose it forever. I created, using careful, creative financing, a free municipal center for the town of Arlington. 2/5 of a building was multi-purpose senior center, and 3/5 of the building we renovated and leased out. That's the kind of way that I like to approach municipal government and municipal finance. There are opportunities to do things in public-private partnership as long as the town controls what's going to happen. And I believe that I can do that, and I hope that I have the opportunity. Thank you very much.
We'll now turn to oh, excuse me.
He didn't cede anything. He
Oh,
wants
I'm
us to.
sorry, Mr. Fuller. I thought you were done. Excuse me.
As I said in my opening remarks, I find the town meeting form of government the last bastion of true democracy in the United States. Every week, or virtually every week, I'm on television trying to present to you what issues there are in town so you can make intelligent decisions during the year and at town meeting. I have felt that it's important that on all the issues, not just the big ones, but all the issues, that it gets out to the public and you have an opportunity to respond. I'd like to be open, transparent, and let everyone have a chance to speak when they want to speak. And I think all of these issues are important. Some seem to be more important to others in some people's minds, but in order to have a well-rounded, well-run town, as affordable as we can, we need to participate and do all of these things, and that's what I would try to bring to you as a continuing selectman.
Now it's time for wastewater. No, hold your applause, please, until the end. Again, we're going to go through the same format, and this is the most controversial issue that I've seen in I think it's 21 or 22 years of being the moderator of town meeting, and so I'll remind you that I expect you to get an A+ for civility here, just as you did for the first part of the program. So the order of the opening statements, which are 3 minutes each with regard to this topic, Mr. McLennan, Mr. Karen, and Mr. Fuller.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Since my formal retirement 10 years ago, as a pastime, I have focused my time on trying to understand the wastewater issues confronting Cape Cod. We live on a national treasure. We are known worldwide. We are fouling the very special environmental resources that make our economy. We are now confronted with the largest infrastructure investment this region will ever face. We must solve this problem, and we must do it right. As a planner, I have devoted my time to understanding the problem, checking the science, and examining the alternatives available leading to a solution. I have participated in many meetings all over Cape Cod in an effort to understand all the alternatives. Through my activities in Orleans, I have participated in many programs that can mitigate the cost of alternative solutions. For example, as chairman of the Open Space Committee, I have led the effort to remove land from potential development so that it would never have to be sewered. You have supported all of these activities. In recent years, the town has acquired 260 acres of land for preservation. 160 of those acres are in nitrogen-sensitive areas and will never have to be sewered to protect our terminal ponds. I have carefully followed the development of our comprehensive wastewater management plan, supported its approval at town meeting in the fall of 2008, and then monitored the plan as it went through the regulatory review process, culminating with its approval by the Cape Cod Commission and the State Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. I have participated and promoted the more recent studies to double-check the costs and the assumptions. We now have a plan that is consistent with the Cape Cod Commission Regional Policy Plan, as well as the requirements of the State Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. We are the only town on Cape Cod that has such a plan that wasn't done under an administrative order. I am proud of that. Our history shows that we started this process 30 years ago. We had a problem downtown then, and we still have one today. We have now discussed the development of this plan 11 times at town meetings over the last 11 years, as we have appropriated funds to refine our plan and double-check our cost estimates. I am convinced that it is time to begin the process of restoring our fouled waterways and ponds. Thank you.
I offer the following reasons why I have earned your consideration to be elected as your selectman on Tuesday, May 21st. First, I'm the only candidate who cares about cost. Second, I am the only candidate who proposed over 5 years ago as selectman to begin to clean our waters by constructing a cluster system at Aries Pond. But a majority of the board voted not to proceed as it did not follow the implementation plans of the draft CWMP. Third, again, as selectman 5 years ago, I proposed we install a permeable reactive barrier at Town Cove that would have addressed the plume which flows from the landfill. This proposal was approved by the DEP, and funding was in process by Representative Delahunt's office, and was unanimously approved by our selectmen's meeting, only to be overturned at the next meeting by a majority of the board. Fourth, I am the only candidate to propose that we begin our clean water initiative by addressing our known #1 hotspot, Meeting House Pond. Any expert will tell us if dollars are limited or tight, prioritize your hotspots and do them first. 5, I'm the only candidate to spearhead a symposium sponsored by the OTA to collaborate on our wastewater issues and solutions. Mr. Fuller can be commended for presenting his proposal, but if it does not have the full support of the board or its residents, it will fail. And I'm asking now, why didn't he support moving forward 5 years ago? Mr. McLennan, to me, is a single-issue candidate. There may be nothing wrong with that, except I am concerned that he spent the latter part of 2011 and 2012 chairing a subcommittee that recommended that the county implement a Cape Cod wastewater district. This concept was rejected by several towns, including our own Board of Selectmen, and it was unanimous. Yet he continues to work with outside organizations in his attempt to ensure implementation of our draft CWMP, as currently written. Was he looking out for the best interest of Orleans when he proposed a county-wide taxing authority? I don't think so, and I did wish he would have joined me in the collaboration of our symposium to seek common ground. In conclusion, our demographics and population is changing. No one will argue that Orleans must stay affordable and viable. A person I respect related to me how people often take ownership of issues which causes them to be blinded by the truth and facts. To do it right, we must collaborate and find common ground where to work from. If we say we care, then let's put aside our individual wants and do what is best for Orleans as a whole. Thank you.
After many years of reading studies, reviews of studies, and listening to presentations, and a vote of approval of the Orleans Comprehensive Wastewater Plan by town meeting, I felt that it was time for somebody to take action. I have always felt that the CWMP was a sound plan overall, with opportunity to change at each phase was developed. Even though the studies I read indicated to me that the marsh was capable of handling freshwater effluent that would be created from some form of treatment, it was still a legitimate concern of the people living where all of this water is disposed. I felt if we were going to ask all the taxpayers to share in the cost of this endeavor, but 45% of them would receive no direct benefit, it would be unfair not to provide some nearby place for them to dispose of their septic waste. Furthermore, the town was suffering from a shortage of affordable places for workforces to reside. If the septic system could be removed from downtown business properties, the newly created bylaw allowing rental units over businesses in the downtown could be realized. Finally, if we could decide what kind of wastewater infrastructure was going to take place in the village center, those visions of the streetscape study and the economic study of the downtown area could move forward. I decided to present a Phase 1A to the CWMP. It is a smaller version of Phase 1 with a specific defined area in the downtown that uses about 11.8% of the water in Orleans, at least in 2012. It is the densest area of town, and believe it or not, there are more residences in that area than businesses. I chose a gravity sewer system because of the inability of a septic tank effluent system to take solids, and therefore the septage from Title V systems. I chose a smaller area that would send a lower volume of water and septage from Orleans residents only because of the concerns of the large amount of fresh water entering the marsh after treatment. It should be viewed as a compromise that allows many different things to happen in the area and still mitigate a significant percentage of nitrogen in the Town Cove watershed. The study that was done by Weston and Sampson at the bequest of last year's town meeting was completed, and financially, from design to construction, the cost of the two types of systems appears to be about the same. But to me, once the infrastructure is in place, the operation and maintenance of the SDE system is much greater than the gravity sewer system. No matter what is decided for design, the Tri-Town site, which has been tested, approved by scientists and by a vote of the legislature, and served as a septic treatment site for over 20 years, is the logical place to build a new, smaller in size, yet expandable plant. Why expandable? We cannot handicap a future board or town meeting if they decided expansion is the way to go. But expansion is not my intent. Also, there have been no estimates for land acquisition for treatment and disposal, and testing to see if those places are acceptable at different properties other than Tri-Town. Thank you very much.
Surely you have questions. Yes, sir, Mr. Reyes. Use a microphone, sir, please. He's coming right there. Thank you.
Thank you. 3 years ago, I went...
Please identify yourself for the...
My name is Louis Reyes. I've lived here for 60 years, and I live on Chase Lane. And I
Thank
pay
you.
my taxes on time.
Thank you.
3 years ago, I went to the Board of Selectmen, and I asked them how many had tore the pollution down in Pleasant Bay. And out of the 5 selectmen, Sue Christie was the only one that she had gone down Pleasant Bay and see the grass, the eelgrass. Mr. McLennan's group, they say there's more pollution, just like I heard Mr. Karen say, the hot spot in Pleasant Bay. I was down Meeting House Pond this morning at 5 o'clock.
Mr. Reyes, excuse me, can you offer a question or rather than a comment?
Show me where the pollution is, show me where the nitrogen is, and show me why the downtown plan was rejected 30 years ago. It was rejected 30 years ago because the business community didn't want to pay for it. But now that the town has to pay for it, they want to have it. Thank you.
So the question is, what evidence has each of the candidates seen with regard to the nitrification of the waters and the pollution of the waters that demands this sort of action? Is that the question?
Thank you.
All right, and then we'll go from Mr. Karen, Mr. Fuller, and Mr. McLennan.
Mr. Reese, you are picking up where Mr. Mayo left off. It's good to have you in the room. I think Meeting House Pond needs to be addressed first, because I really do believe, no matter which side of this issue you're on, it is our known hotspot. I mean, I have a map from the county, and if you look from essentially Dennis to Provincetown, there's 2 towns that have hotspots, and they indicate that by a nice big red color on the map. Chatham is one, Orleans is the other. You know where Orleans' red spot is? It's at Meeting House Pond. My concern is, at some point, our pocketbooks are going to run dry. If we are to make improvements in water quality, I don't understand why the people that have been fighting for this for years would not also be fighting to get it done where it's the worst, and that's Meeting House Pond. Now, I'm a businessman. Downtown, we need to do something at downtown. But downtown has turned out to be, for economic reasons, for improved business downtown. Now, I don't know if you watched the Selectmen's meeting or anything, but in the past 2 weeks, Captain Elmer's is now being revitalized. Rosina's is being revitalized. Guapo's, which just opened up, is going to enlarge, I think, triple their size. The Jailhouse Tavern has been sold. So what's our problem with downtown? It certainly seems to be going well. And in January, February, March, it's nice when you can go downtown at 5 o'clock and not see too much. Most of the businesses are closed. So I love revitalizing downtown, but first of all, I don't think downtown needs revitalizing. I think it's
Mr. Karen, your time is up.
Thank you.
Mr. Fuller?
I have watched this problem over the last 8 years, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, I don't know what to look for to see what the actual pollution is. It's probably not all that clear. However, the state regulatory people have told us that we must correct this problem at the point source, which is septic systems. And if we don't do this, they're going to tell us to do it, whether we can demonstrate that it's actually polluted or not. One of their measuring tools is eelgrass. Eelgrass seems to be less than it was before. I don't know for sure. I don't remember what it was before. I think downtown is the place to start because it follows the basic tenet of our approved comprehensive wastewater plan. It's just a smaller version of it to make it more affordable. And I still think if we do not revitalize downtown and the number of residences that are down there, we're still going to have the same issue come up again and again and again. We'll study it some more, and we'll never take a stand. I preferred to try to take a stand. Thank you.
Mr. McLennan?
Yes, response to Mr. Reese. Thank you for the question. Mr. Karen has pointed out that 100% of the nitrogen has to be removed from Meeting House Pond. You've seen it You understand it. That's what you said. Second, 56% of the nitrogen has to be removed from Town Cove. Nitrogen, as Mr. Karen has pointed out, has to be removed from Aries Pond, Catskill-Gansett Pond, and Plowow Pond. That is what the scientists and the regulators have told us. You can't see it, but it has to be removed. That's what the plan says. That's what the plan has been approved by the Cape Cod Commission and the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. Those are the facts. Thank you.
When he's done, are you done, Mr. McLennan?
I'll stop now.
You're entitled to a follow-up question. There's a microphone coming right away, Mr. Rice.
The establishment of the nitrogen level was done about 10 years ago. A scientist, a biologist, told me they went outside of the inlet in Chatham, took a bottle of water, and it was clean, and that was the establishment of nitrogen. As far as Meeting House Pond having 100% of nitrogen removing, I want to tell you, ask your membership where the town landing is on Barney Neck.
Mr. Reyes, this is your follow-up comment. I'll give you 10 more seconds. If you got a question, please give me a question.
Okay.
Otherwise, this bunch is going to put you on the write-in ballot.
Yeah, beat me.
Thank you.
Meeting House Pond has 30-odd feet of new grass right where they put the new docks. That's Dana Eldridge. If that grass grows anymore, and there's also sage, something that hadn't grown for years. That area we used to dig clams in, and I'm talking 30, 40, 50 years. I've treaded those waters in Meeting House Pond and Cape Cod, Pleasant Bay and Cape Cod Bay for over 50 years. So I know from which I speak.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that a question, Mr.
No, that's
Moderator?
not a question.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's a follow-up comment. Yes, sir, up there. 60 years of living in the town gives you special privileges in terms of making comments.
Welcome. Good to see everybody up there. Ben Buck. I really don't know how to explain, other than I see two different trains coming at each other in this election. And it seems for 10 years we've fought too long.
Mr. Buck, ask your question, please.
Well, my question is, after all the fighting, what got cleaned up? Is anything got cleaned up? I've seen Mr. Karen try to get something cleaned up, but I've seen Mr. Fuller present some kind of alternative.
Mr. Buck, can you ask a question, please?
Well, the question is, for all of them, when are you going to start cleaning things up? And this is really, there could have been something done several years ago under Mr. Karen's leadership.
I think I'll ask the candidates to handle that in their closing statements rather than, it's a generic question. I think it's on all our minds, but it doesn't provide enough pith. Another question. Yes. Yes, you first, is that, you've already spoken. Let's hear from someone who hasn't, then I'll call on you.
Mary Ann Peskowski, East Orleans. I happen to agree with Mr. Fuller about the need to start the process in downtown. I have a question. How come the town never bought that rat hole of a laundromat, and now Carla's, it's in the dead center of downtown, and I personally, that's the first thing I see. Why didn't we buy it when we had the chance? Mr. Fuller.
Oh, hang on with that. Do you gentlemen understand the question?
I understand the question. I'm not sure I have the answer.
All right, I can't relate that to wastewater. Mr. Hanyon, I think it was?
Follow up.
No follow-up, ma'am. You had your shot at a question. Formulate your question, refine it, and we'll get back to it. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. To Mr. Karen, if Tri-Town is not used for treatment and disposal of our wastewater, what other sites are being considered? What sites were considered for a decentralized system? How many would there be, and where would they be?
All right, we'll go with Mr. Karen, Mr. Fuller, and then Mr. McLennan.
To me, the confusing piece of the current draft CWMP is that it has several cluster systems spelled out. One of them is in the area that I live, Aries Pond. The problem with that is that it is only a cluster system until the sewers come down 28 and it connects to it. And my numbers might be off a little, but I think to have those cluster systems treated while the big sewers are coming is about 19 million. Now, my question is I mean, I know there's been a lot of question about what's bondable and what isn't bondable, but if $19 million of the cost is associated with those temporary cluster systems, I doubt that they're bondable. And I also doubt that you can finance them over 30 years. That question has not been asked nor answered. I think we need to know that type of information before we move forward.
Well, to follow up a little bit on Mr. Karen, then the last thing, it has been asked if those type of things are bondable, but we have not received the answer yet. I think the gravity sewer for downtown is all I'm talking about at this time. I'm not concerned with the other phases at this time. We have plenty of time once we do begin a program to refine those other areas. And as a matter of fact, on the town warrant, the 1A plan puts money aside for the pre-design of a decentralized system for Phase 2, which is Meeting House Pond. We have found that it will probably be bondable if you can wrap it in with something that has construction. And that was the purpose of putting it there. I have not lost sight of the whole CWMP. I don't consider it a draft anymore. It has been approved by the state and by the Cape Cod Commission. But I think it's too large to start all at once. That's why I've recommended a Phase 1A. It follows the plan, but it gives a little bit to everybody on all of their concerns. Thank you.
Let me comment on this. First of all, the system that Mr. Karen is talking about was part of Phase 2 of the original plan. And since we're not even beyond Phase 1A yet, we can't get to Phase 2. And the fact is, if you deviate from the approved plan, you lose the opportunity for zero interest loans. And to me, that is one of the critical things that is in the Fuller plan that we need to take advantage of. As a consultant, I have dealt with zero interest loans in another community. I know how it works, and I know that the town of Orleans is in a position to take advantage of them. And I just want to point out what this means. Because we have an approved plan, and we have adopted land use regulations over the years as town meeting, we have the opportunity. We're one of 2 communities in Massachusetts that comply to the state revolving loan fund to borrow money to build a phased plan in accordance with our comprehensive wastewater management plan and pay no interest on those loans. Now, I'll let you do the math. If we ultimately go to Phase 1A, as John Fuller has pointed out, the estimated cost today, based on 2 separate estimates, is about $30 million. $30 million over 30 years at zero interest is $1 million a year. You can go back and you can figure out what it would be at 2.5% or 4.5%, and it's a lot more money. So we need to comply with what we have in our comprehensive wastewater plan if we are going to take advantage of zero interest loans, and they exist until 2019, and the only 2 communities that qualify them is Chatham and Orleans. And that is a very powerful position for us to be in. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Microphone coming.
Follow-up here?
I'll ask you, I'll call on you again, but I'd like to move along and have other questions. You've had a couple of questions already, so Perhaps we'll run out of questions and get back to you.
The original Weston and Sampson study estimated that for Phase 1, centralized sewers would cost $10 million more than the decentralized alternative. The discussion of zero-interest loans is interesting, but if we pay $10 million more for the solution, that doesn't seem like such a great deal. And my question is, why do we want to spend $10 million more on this? And why didn't we get an estimate for the decentralized as well as the centralized for Phase 1A?
To whom are you directing that question, sir?
Everyone.
So Mr. Fuller, and then Mr. McLennan, and then Mr. Karen.
There was not enough money that was available to study all of those things. And to that time, I was the only one that put out a plan. The other plans didn't surface until later. And we used the extension of the Weston and Sampson report to put a price to a gravity sewer for downtown. The reason I picked a gravity sewer is because the decentralized sewering does not handle septic or solids. I found that to be an extra cost. I do not share your view that it would be $10 less, $10 million less. Okay? So that's the reason I chose the plan. It's a compromise. It does not satisfy everybody. It may not even be the cheapest one to go, but I hope it would be in the long run. Because when you get to operation and maintenance, that's just as important as what it costs up front. And I believe that a STE system costs more to operate and maintain and to prepare your septic tank than a central sewer would.
Okay. Just to correct the $10 million that's just been mentioned, yes, when the Weston and Sampson independent consultants were asked to compare a decentralized system, STE system, with the centralized system, Phase 1 of the CWMP originally included the construction of a plant at Tri-Town that would be constructed for and be ready for the first 3 phases. That's why there was an extra $10 million in there. What Mr. Fuller has done, and I admire him for doing that, is stepping back and saying we should only have a treatment plant for Phase 1A. And that means you're not building infrastructure in advance of the need, and you also can then decide how you're going to go on with Phase 2. And what Mr. Fuller has pointed out, which is important to understand, that in Warrant Article 11, there's $2.1 million for design of Phase 1A, and there's $1.4 million to look at Meeting House Pond to see if it could have a decentralized system and whether or not it would be cost effective. And part of that, which is critical to understand, would be to find locations where the effluent can be treated and where it can be disposed. That is the critical test, and going back to an earlier question, there were 26 sites that were included in the CWMP for disposal. It costs about $100,000 to test a site, and the Comprehensive Wastewater Planning Committee settled in on Tri-Town and spent $120,000 to make sure that would work, and no other site was ever tested. I transmitted those sites to the Board of Selectmen last fall, and nothing happened to it. But the fact is, they're in the CWMP, and they would have to be tested as part of any treatment plant for any other location in Orleans. Thank you.
You know, this issue is very tough because it pits people against people because one doesn't and one does want clean water, when in fact we all want clean water. It's really how we're going to accomplish it. And let me just say, we have a lot of things going on in this town, a lot of great things going on in this town. But we all have fixed incomes that we live on. I don't care if you have $10 million in the bank and you live on Nauset Heights. You live, if you're retired here, on a fixed income. You call your broker and you tell your broker, I want X dollars every year or every month sent to my checking account, and that's what you live on. What concerns me about downtown, and I think Mr. Fuller's plan as first proposed probably was good. It was a plant for only downtown, It was not going to be for regional, but if you watch the Selectmen's meeting tomorrow night, you're going to see that it's now a modular plant, and it's now for regional, because at their meeting this past week with Eastham, they were told by Eastham that Eastham wants to be part of the region.
Follow-up?
Yes.
Yes. It was always a modular plant. The reason I told you I would do a modular plant is at some future Board of Selectmen or some future town meeting wanted to expand that site. It was not our purview to not allow them to do that by making a vote. It was always a modular site. As far as regionalization with Eastham and Brewster, it was never considered as regionalization with Eastham and Brewster, the 1A. We told Eastham and Brewster they are not far enough along in their plans for us to even consider anything like that, and that would be for a phase down the line if it were to happen, not for 1A. It would be septic treatment for Orleans residents only.
Yes, ma'am.
As a town, we are tasked with getting rid of nitrogen from our waters. One of the proposals has been to put in conservation moorings. Can you explain how conservation moorings will remove nitrogen?
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Carolyn Kennedy.
Thank you. And so we'll have that question from left to right. Mr. McLennan, Mr.
Yes.
Fuller, and then Mr. Karen.
Understand, I've looked at conservation moorings for a long time because I have had the luxury of, in my lifetime, having moorings in 5 of the estuaries in Orleans, so I know what the bottoms are like. The cold, hard facts are that conservation moorings do not remove nitrogen. They do not. The definitive study that was completed in January by the Urban Harbors Institute tested a series of moorings that they installed in Provincetown and in Manchester by the Sea, and they determined, yes, they probably allowed eelgrass to come back, but there is no evidence that they do anything with nitrogen. I have some association with Mattapoisett and Buzzards Bay for extended family, and I went back and I looked and I discovered that the town of Marion installed conservation moorings in Sippacan Harbor after Hurricane Bob. And some of you who are sailors know that all the boats in Sippacan Harbor ended up in the marsh by Burr Brothers Boatyard. The town then adopted a policy, all the moorings had to be replaced. I then went back and I looked at 20 years of water quality testing in Sippacan Harbor. After those moorings were put in, not any change in nitrogen or water quality occurred because of the installation of those moorings. Thank you.
I have to agree with Mr. McLennan. I see no way that a mooring could eliminate nitrogen from the water, so I think that's really kind of a moot issue. As far as stirring up the bottom or increasing the clarity of water, possibly, but we need to study it at a slow pace, not just jump right into it. I don't believe the bottom at Meeting House Pond is really acceptable for mooring changes. It's very muddy. So you will see in your warrant money put aside to put some test sites at Port Nimicut and Quonset Harbor where the bottom is more acceptable to see if there is any change. But again, they will never remove any nitrogen from the water.
Mr. Kennedy, I honestly, I'm not an expert on it, so I can't say one way or the other. What I will give the town credit for is, one, starting to discuss the topic. My understanding was that there was a good showing by some installers or sellers this past month, and I think I even heard that they said that they're not sure whether it takes care of nitrogen. I think because of our issue, what we should be doing is looking at every possible alternative. And I would also say we shouldn't spend a lot of money to test it, but I do think it's worth testing because there doesn't seem to be any definitive, and I'm talking about what I heard from the providers, that to their knowledge it's never been tested. So if we could do it smaller, maybe even smaller than what's proposed, but I do think we should start to eliminate what helps and what doesn't help.
Yes.
in the warrant, I don't see anything that says that we're going to do anything to do any testing or research as part of this $200,000 investment.
Are you referring, there's two places where that issue, are you referring to the Warren article that's in the general, in the annual? Are you referring to the special?
Not Article 12.
Okay.
Well, it is in both places.
Yes, but you're talking about the one that's in the warrant.
I was talking specifically about
All
the
right.
warrant.
You're directing that at a particular candidate?
No.
All right. Then let's have Mr. Fuller, Mr. Karen, and Mr. McClellan comment on that if they wish.
At the suggestion of the harbor master, we asked him to do a survey of what he thought about conservation moorings and where a good test site might be. And he recommended, as I said, Port of Niveket and Quonset Harbor, because he felt the bottom was more conducive to giving a good test of whether eelgrass could recover there. And that would be part of the RFP once you decide to spend the money or not.
I guess I agree with what John or Mr. Fuller just said. I'm not sure if the way it's written, if the selectmen have some purview to take some of those and do some testing along with it. But that should be the whole purpose to me behind that article, would be to do it at a small, contained area and test to see if it does do anything before we spend $1,000 per mooring.
Just to comment, the special town meeting has warrant Article 12, which has $400,000 for conservation moorings. And if you listen to the Finance Committee discussion and the Board of Selection discussion, and I've been there every single meeting since mid-January. I think John Fuller and Gwen Holden Kelly and I get the award for not missing any meetings. But the fact is that there has been discussions about the town taking over everybody's private moorings and starting a new business to install conservation moorings. If you go back and you look at the studies on Meeting House Pond, there is no reason to install conservation moorings if your intention is to restore eelgrass, because there was never any eelgrass there. The bottom of that pond is so filled with muck that you could never make a conservation mooring work there. They tried it in Chatham, in Mill Pond, Upper Mill Pond. They went down 40 feet and they did not get through the mud. And if you have to do 40 feet for each of 100 and some odd moorings in Meeting House Pond, it is more than $1,000 a meeting, and I don't think the town of Orleans should be in that kind of business. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Mr. Moderator. Richard Delaney, South Orleans. I've heard several people comment tonight, or actually lament the fact that we have not been able to take any real action on this issue for a couple of decades. Now, there's some groups that suggest we postpone action again until we wait for an expected regional framework plan from the Cape Cod Commission. Would any of the candidates support delaying action one more time, waiting for that plan to be finished?
Mr. Karen, and then Mr. McClellan and Mr. Fuller.
The people on the inside, I will just tell you, what the county is now proposing is a major change from where they were headed before. I happened to have the opportunity to spend a couple of hours at EPA's office with Ken Maraff, and he, if you don't know, he is the lead enforcer for EPA for our area. I asked him whether we should continue to move on with what we're doing, and he kind of gave me this look saying, hey, look, we're being sued by a firm, and they're telling us we're not hard enough on everybody, so he says, you're not going to hear anything from me. But what he did say is two things. Number one, he says, has the county been to your Board of Selectmen and informed them about this new direction and the fact that they got a letter from the governor and the fact that the governor gave them $3 million to do this new direction? I said, no, they have not. And then he said, well, have you been following Falmouth? and seeing what Falmouth did. They stopped their plan and started to spend $3 million themselves to look at different alternatives. And there were 3 people in the room. One was Mr. Morath, one was an individual who's working directly with Falmouth, and another one that is a liaison to government. And we said, no, we weren't. He suggested that we start to look at what's happening in Falmouth, which the EPA is working directly with to see how effective their solutions are. They do not want big infrastructure.
Mr.
McClellan?
Oh, all right. What I said earlier this evening was that the town of Orleans has an approved comprehensive wastewater management plan, approved by the Cape Cod Commission and approved by the State Department of Energy and Environmental Affairs. That plan was vetted against the regional policy plan, and our plan was tested by watershed. And those people who were involved will remember that there were extensive discussions with the town of Brewster and the town of Eastham because our watersheds were shared. The fact is that the town of Orleans has an approved plan, and the county planning process will have no direct impact on our approved plan. That is what I have been told by talking to key officials at the Cape Cod Commission, and we need to remember that. If you look carefully at what the county has promoted, they say, this is what should be in a plan, our plan, and ask if we meet it. Allows for a process to prioritize watersheds that need to be addressed most quickly. Downtown is that watershed. Second, provides opportunities for alternative approaches. Our plan does that. Third, facilitates the use of shared infrastructure that is appropriately sized. Our plan does that as well. Fourth, allows for wastewater collection in areas where it makes the most sense, based on parcel connection density and percent nitrogen remove required. Downtown is far more cost-effective than Meeting House Pond. And finally, give consideration to affordability and community character. And what is proposed under 1A does exactly that. Thank you.
Well, I would like to quote from a letter from Paul Niedzwiecki, who is the Executive Director of the Cape Cod Commission. And it says, this letter is in response to your request for an opinion of the Cape Cod Commission staff regarding 2 pending town meeting warrant articles and their consistency with the Orleans Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan. Development of regional impact approval. We encourage the town to move forward with the wastewater infrastructure planning, design, and construction consistent with the Orleans CWMP DRI approval. And what this means to me is, even though they said you should look at other areas and places where people have not moved as far along as we have, they don't disapprove of us moving forward with our plan. They're not telling us to change our plan. In fact, they're indicating if we change our plan significantly, we would have to go through the DRI process again. So I think the Cape Cod Commission has made it evidently clear that they support what we're doing and support our plan, and the fact that we've tried to make it more affordable to everybody is in the best interest of all.
Yes, sir. Gentleman in the blue.
Thank you. Nello Trevison. This question I'd like to direct to Mr. Fuller, if I may. The question pertains to the Weston and Sampson estimates of cost for the small pipe alternative. The question is, was Weston and Sampson questioned by the Board of Selectmen regarding the following 2 items? Their estimate of septic tank replacement cost of $12,000 per property, when in fact the cost by local contractors is $6,000 per property, an overstatement of cost by $18 million. And number 2, their non-inclusion of horizontal drilling savings commonly used with small pipe installation across the country and daily with electric and gas companies on Cape Cod, which would have reduced their estimate by another $20 million. So these 2 items alone are worth $38 million. So the question again is,
Were they challenged and questioned about these two items, and what was their explanation? Or if they weren't challenged or questioned, why weren't they? Thank you.
Now, does everyone on the panel understand the question? It's a complex question, and we can ask for repetition. All right. Then this directed at you, Mr. Fuller, then Mr. McClellan, then Mr. Karen.
We listened to the presentation. We did not challenge anybody. The idea of the presentation by Weston Sampson was to be completely independent, without interference from the Board of Selectmen or anyone else. We did ask them if they had looked at those things. They said no. And one of the reasons they gave is we do not know what's under the ground at this time and whether that would be a meaningful use of that type of drilling, but they didn't preclude it. Secondly, with the other issue, we did not challenge them on that either, but they said we have to give you the worst case scenario because we don't know the answer to that. That information has not been obtained. If it were to be true, then we could use those types of installations, and it would reduce the cost. But I challenge the fact that it would be a $38 million difference.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to address both those issues. This came up in August. I testified before the Board of Selectmen at that time, and I suggested that it would be appropriate for the town to do the necessary surveys to find out what's in the streets. The cold, hard fact is we don't know. I've been told by professional engineers that it costs about $30,000 per mile to survey and understand what's in the street. And you need to know everything that's there, and then you got to call DigSafe when you start to make sure you don't hit something. So Weston and Sampson, as professional engineers, did exactly what they had to do. They did not know, and they had to estimate. Second, in the matter of septic tanks, 62% of the tanks in downtown Orleans would have to be replaced. 62% because they're too small or they're too old, and by the way, we have a lot of cesspools downtown as well. In my own professional consulting advice, I have recently bid 2 separate septic tank projects. One of them cost $13,000, and a second one was bid publicly, and there were 9 bidders, and the cost ranged from $15,000 to $31,000. So I have difficulty understanding the $6,000 number that you have, because this will be a public project, and it will have to be bid under the prevailing wage law. And those are the costs that I uncovered about 3 weeks ago at a public bid. So I respect Weston and Sampson for not taking us down a path where we would be surprised at the end. They said, you do not know the answer to these 2 questions, and we're going to assume that the worst case. They are good professionals when they do that, and I appreciate that.
You know, I've been privileged, I guess, to so far knock on about 850 doors during this election. And you know what a good number of people are telling me is, and this is the people outside of this whole discussion, is they said they're very confused and they're very concerned. The Finance Committee does not have any numbers. I believe Mr. Fuller advised us that tomorrow night the Board of Selectmen are going to review some numbers. But to me, there's 5 numbers that we have not yet told the taxpayers what it's going to cost, and it's not just for downtown. Please don't miss Mr. McLennan's emphasis on the plan. And here are the 5. Whether you're downtown or Aries Pond or Meeting House Pond or Lonnie's Pond, connection fee, betterment tax, property tax, user fees, that's to me every time you flush you're going to pay, and O&M. When we have those numbers and we can show you what it's going to cost phase 1 through 6, then you'll know what it's going to cost you. But we don't have those numbers. Just think of what's going to happen if you're Old Colony Village. That whole street is frontage for Old Colony. what are they going to have to pay for betterment? What is going to happen to their condominium user fees? We want to keep Orleans affordable? It concerns me.
Mr. Moderator, could I just make one comment on that
Yes.
issue?
I'll give you 30 seconds, please.
Okay, 30 seconds, all I need. Mr. Karen was on the Board of Selectmen when they voted that 80% of the cost of the wastewater plan would be borne by the taxpayers in general and 20% would be borne by the users. He voted for that, and that's the policy that's in effect right now.
Thank you. Yes. No, there's a question right here.
Judith Bruce, South Orleans. Starting with Mr. Karen, but all of the candidates, if they would please discuss effluent system versus conventional gravity system, which they prefer and why.
So Mr. Karen, Mr. Fuller, and then Mr. McClellan. McLennan.
You know, I'd love to answer that question and get down on the muck and start talking about it. But you know what? Most of us out here don't even know what we're talking about. What I think the voters want to know is, what will clean my water? What will clean it the most effective? And the last is, what's it going to cost me? We have to leave it to the experts to make sure that the right stuff is installed correctly. But we don't have very good history here in Orleans about making sure the experts do things right. So, getting into the muck and talking about whether it's small pipes, big pipes, you know, it makes me feel good, it makes you feel good, Ms. Bruce, but the average voter, they're confused. It's time for us to come together for their sake, for our sake, and come up with a right solution for all of us.
Well, I thought the purpose of this whole meeting was to help alleviate some of that confusion. If we're not successful, I'm sorry for that. I chose a gravity sewer system because I feel that the septic tank effluent system does not do everything it needs to do for everybody. It does not handle solids, which means that if we put a septic tank effluent system downtown, each time once the septic tank is prepared to do that, the solids would have to be removed periodically and taken somewhere and disposed. That's a problem for me. Since it won't handle solids, it means those people that are still on Title V's and septic tanks, they're left out in the cold. You clean up your place any way you want, you know, but you can't leave your stuff here. You might have to take it to Bourne or somewhere else. I thought that was unfair. That's why 1A is a compromise. It's a starting point. Let us get our feet wet, no pun intended, and get this plan underway, and then see how it goes and see what changes we have to make. Thank you.
As I mentioned about an hour ago when we started this session, I have devoted the last 10 years of my life attending conferences, and I didn't care what kind of system was presented. I wanted to find out what worked, what it did, how much it cost, and what the operating costs were. And I have come to the conclusion that proceeding in Phase 1A is best for the town of Orleans. It is a reliable system. It is a system that takes advantage of a site for disposal that we have been testing and operating in for the last 25 years. It is a system that has fewer mechanical parts than the STE system. And as I have examined other experiences across the United States, I'm struck by the system that was installed in Olympia, Washington. Olympia, Washington had a standard gravity system in downtown. And then as the capital of the state of Washington, it began to go through growth spurts. And what happens in many places, and we haven't seen a lot of it here in Orleans recently, is when the land begins to get developed, the developer wants to produce a system. He's got to provide water, electricity, gas, and disposal. And so they installed an STE system. And as I looked at that system and read about it, 90% of the failures and service calls in that system today, which is a combined gravity and SDE on the outskirts, are in the SDE portion, and they are in the process of converting from SDE to gravity. I cannot support going down that path in the town of Orleans because I think we need to be very, very careful about what the costs are and what the operating costs are. Thank you.
Yes, sir, up there. And
Douglas Plusenic. Sea levels have been rising and will continue to do so. This means increased flushing in our saltwater ways. Since most of the CWMP nitrogen data has been derived from samples that are 8 to 12 years old, how can we be sure today the town cove even needs to be sewered?
Mr. McClellan, Mr. Karen, and then Mr. Fuller.
Just to correct the records, the readings in Town Cove were taken in 2006, so that's about 7 years old, I guess. 8 to 10, no, 7. We understand, and the town of Orleans has actually reactivated all the test stations that we had beginning in the early 2000, excuse me. You can tell my age now. And so we have monitoring data that we are continuing to collect, which is taken by people who must be requalified every single year in order to take that data. It is then tested at SMAST. The information that we have does not agree with what you have suggested. You are referring to the ASA report, and it's my belief that the ASA consultants took back of most of what they said in their first report. And so, as that information has been published, it does not include the fact that they ended up agreeing with what SMAST had ultimately said. So, I think that we're moving in the right process. We continue to test our waters. We'll continue to test our waters. And I suspect that sometime in the future, as we move ahead, we will probably actually rerun the model when we have enough information. We know that several years ago, we looked at all the Pleasant Bay data, and we had an outside company come in and look at that data post-break, and they said there is not enough statistical information available yet to say that the break has made a difference in Pleasant Bay. Now, 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, that may be the case, and I suspect the Pleasant Bay Alliance will have that done, but we are monitoring on a regular basis to deal with flushing and sea level rise. I would just close by saying that there was a rush of fresh salt water into Pleasant Bay when that break took place. But if you look at some of the work that's done by the Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies, actually the prism has declined now and the tides are not as high and the lows are not as low. So there's less flushing in Pleasant Bay than there was in the first couple of years. Thank you.
Mr. Karen?
Boy, you know, you start talking about tides and testing and TMDLs and what do we have and what don't we have. Let's face it, one thing we don't have is we don't have the TMDLs. We have it for one area, and it's been over 10 years. I think what we have to do is certainly maintain the testing. And I think even Dr. Howes has indicated with the changes, and since the test was done last, at least through his lab, they should be rerun, which I think Mr. McClellan just indicated. You know, Mother Nature has certainly sent us for a loop this past winter. There's a lot of things going on. My whole point here is we have to do something. Mr. McClellan wants to do the CWMP as it's written, all 6 phases with a plant at Nanskakit. There's never been any testing at Nanskakit about the freshwater inflow there. They talk about nitrogen all the time as, don't worry, it can handle nitrogen. There's no argument that Nanskakit can handle nitrogen. But there is a huge argument and disagreement on what the freshwater influx. They talk that there's a clay layer There's been no testing to state that there's a clay layer. How can we say that stuff? I find it frustrating. I mean, or maybe call it passion with me or something. But I'm afraid we're getting to the stage where we're going to make this town only affordable to the people that want to buy and build their homes and be here for the summer. I'm sorry, I grew up here. I think I have a pretty good job. But this is going to be tough, and I don't believe this town can afford all 6 phases and run this town. Our budget this year to run the town is $30 million.
It's a big red sign in front of us.
Mr. Moderator, point of personal privilege, please.
Yeah, but Mr. Fuller hasn't had an opportunity to speak.
Very good.
I have to disagree with Mr. Karen on the testing of the marsh. It has been tested. I believe it was Dr. Weiskell that has looked at the clay layer and has found that there is a clay layer there. Details about it may not be as clear, but it has been tested and it has been there. It has been said over and over again in these many studies that we've read and gone over that most of them feel that the marsh can handle a great amount of influx of fresh water, even if we sewered the whole town. In my compromise plan, I feel for the fact that maybe it can't take all of that water, so I suggested a smaller plant. But I want one that can be expanded if it's necessary in the future. 1A is all about now. Yes, it could lead to the entire phasing, but it doesn't mean we can't adjust that phasing along the way. It's going to happen over decades. It's going to be expensive, yes. We've been directed to do something. If we don't do it now with ourselves, somebody is going to tell us what to do, and it will probably be the implementation of the full wastewater management plan.
Mr. McClellan, I'm going to ask you just simply to handle your response of personal privilege with regard to your opportunity to speak to one of these other questions or in your closing statement.
Fine, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Bauer.
Gary Clinton. I have 2 comments to make from responses from the candidates there before I ask a question. One is that the Olympia, Washington situation...
Just please ask a question. You'll have your opportunity at town meeting to point out that, but put it in the form of a question.
There are several errors that have been made from this dais in the past 10 minutes. Here's my question. When are the Board of Selectmen or the Wastewater Management Steering Committee going to go to an operating system in another state, because there's not a comparable system in Massachusetts, to see how the small pipe system works? They work very efficiently, and I talk regularly with systems that have been operating for 20 years with no problem. You have to have the best equipment and a system that will manage itself. And if you can do that, you're going to have a 1/3 saving in the cost, and including maintenance. And I can cite situations if anybody wants to ask me after this. So when is there going to be some due diligence to actually go out of Orleans to a place where they actually do it? And you'll see how it works. Thank you very much.
Well, let's have an answer to that question by all means, though. I think there's a nugget there. Mr. Fuller, Mr. Karen, and Mr. McLennan.
First of all, there is no more wastewater steering committee, so they will not be going out to another place. And at this time, the Board of Selectmen have not made any plans to send themselves or anyone else to look at another system in the state or elsewhere.
Mr. McCarran? Mr. Karen?
Mr. McCarran.
I said Mr. Karen.
We got to have some lighter moments here. You got to say something or something. You know, when I did the symposium through the OTA, I was really hoping that we could kind of avoid all of this, where one expert says this, the other expert says that, who's the expert, who isn't the expert, and I just plead with you. We have average voters out there that want to know from us what needs to be done. We have to stop one-upping each other. And we only are going to be able to do that if we kind of give in a little. I mean, how many of us in this room probably right now are saying, you know, Washington ought to be talking? If we're saying that about Washington, we need to be saying that about ourselves. I'm included in that as part of the Finance Committee. John's included in that as part of the board. You're included in that as part of the group that wants to know. We're not going to get very far at town meeting. We need 2/3 vote to pass either 11 or 12. That is very hard to do. But the other thing is, we have to clean up our waters. We have to start talking and respecting each other.
Yes, obviously, I'm sitting here as a candidate. I've never sat on the Board of Selectmen, so I can't comment what the Board of Selectmen may do. And John Fuller noted that the Wastewater Management Steering Committee doesn't exist anymore. So I can't answer your question, Mr. Clinton. If I were elected to the Board of Selectmen, I would continue to do what I've been doing for the last 10 years, visiting every damn plant that I can possibly get into. And I would continue to do that. I just want to correct one thing that was said earlier. I've made it very clear that I support Phase 1A. I have also made it very clear that I support the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan that was voted by the voters of Orleans and has been funded for implementation 11 times. That is my position. If the voters decide at town meeting that they want to do something else, if I'm elected selectman, I will follow the wishes of the Board of Selectmen. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Gussie McCusick. Question for all three of the candidates, and thank you for being here tonight. Is it not true that the proposal that is going to be called Article 11, 1A, is it not true that that is the best compromise that we can come up with all sides in this question? Number two, it is a perfect adaptive management. Take a little bite and see how it goes. And is it not true that because of our unique position to have approved plans, and if we don't do this now, we will lose our opportunity for funding at 0% interest, and we will lose our opportunity to do things from the grassroots here in our town because somebody else will take over. There will be no more DRI approvals, no more MEPR approvals.
I'm going to ask in the future that your questions be unfreighted. What I'm going to take that as a question, and you just used up your comment at town meeting. The question is, what is your position with regard to Article 11 and why? And we'll start out with Mr. McLennan, and then Mr. Karen, and then Mr. Fuller. And please, candidates, try not to repeat yourselves.
I've made it clear my position on Article 11, and I want to say why. First of all, it is the most efficient way to begin wastewater remediation in Orleans. And let me give you some statistics to help you understand that. The Phase 1A plan has 700 connections, and it would encompass 6 miles of road. Therefore, 45 linear feet of pipe per connection, which happens to be only 29% of what would happen in Meeting House Pond watershed, which has only 300 properties and has 9 miles of road. And one of the things that you look at in implementing a wastewater plan is density and efficiency of removing the effluent and treating it. The Phase 1A plan uses the Tri-Town site. It is 500 feet from the southern boundary of Phase 1A, and in fact, if you read the Weston and Sampson report, it would be directionally drilled. The proposal for Meeting House Pond in warrant Article 11, but it's also looked at in Article 11, is 6 miles of road, as I pointed, I'm sorry, it's 1 mile from the eastern boundary and 2 3/4 miles from the western boundary. So it's harder to get to the hotel site, the motel site, and it's more expensive, and we don't even know if it's going to work. So I think what Mr. Fuller has proposed in warrant Article 11 is a very good idea, because you're going to be able to spend enough money, $1.4 million, to find out if the Meeting House Pond septic effluent system will work. If you look at the alternative in 12, very quickly, there is not enough money in $150,000 to find out where the utilities are. Thank you.
Well,
Mr. Karen, it's Mr. Karen. Mr.
He changed his name.
Oh, no.
You know, I just, you know, Alan, who knows the subject inside and out, you saw how he was stumbling over the facts, trying to get them out correctly. And we're all trying to do that. It's difficult. I do not agree with the questioner when it was indicated that we could not get a new DRI. I believe if we go with a sensible plan to do what is necessary to clean our waters, the county will cooperate, the state will cooperate, the federal government will cooperate with us 100%, maybe 1,000%. I don't like everything piles on, because if we don't do it this way, it's not going to be approved. I'm sorry. From what I see from the regulators, they just want us to start to do something right. And they will support us no matter what action that is. They will not come in and say, oh, if you want to do Meeting House Pond or Lonnie Ponds first, we're not going to give you another DRI. You've got to start with downtown. Downtown has to be done. I mean, downtown has to be done. But my concern is whether we will have enough money. I mean, what I'm hearing from some people, not all, but some people say, if they want to do downtown, the commercial guys can pay for it. I'm not going to take my tax dollars to pay for it. So we have to start talking. That's my point. It's not that it shouldn't be done. It's not that we don't want to or can't clean our waters. We have to. I just am concerned about the cost. I think John's plan is letting the camel under the tent. And I think Mr. McLennan's group is using it as an opportunity to do the 6 phases. I would love him to say right now, tonight,
The stop sign is up again, that red sign, so I'm going to ask you to, Mr. Fuller, it's your 2 minutes.
Well, this is sort of difficult for me to answer. I'm for the 1A plan. I came up with the 1A plan. I brought it before the Board of Selectmen for a vote for both money and planning purposes. I personally think it's the best way to go. I have looked at all kinds of alternatives, and I think this makes the most sense for the downtown and to get the cleaning of the waters underway. Is it perfect for everybody? Obviously not. Is it inexpensive? Certainly isn't. But is it the most efficient way and in the long run and does the most things for the town? I believe it is. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Paul Cash, Orleans. I have I saw the scientist and they answered the questions. But this threshold for nitrogen, and one of their answers was 0, negative effects to very little. I don't understand that. It's like listening to you explain, the conservation moorings. You have to go to the meetings and listen to the things. Now, all this water is going to go to this Ninskaket marsh there. Now, a comment was made.
Do you have a question?
Yes, but I have to frame it, please.
Well, please frame it.
Land was donated, or land was bought, and no septic systems can go in there. Yet there are 60 acres was donated by Namscake Marsh, and no septic system can be put in there, but all these zillions of gallons of effluents are going to end up in there anyway, and they have no real scientific proof that no or zero will be done. But my question is, 10% of our problems are commercial fertilizers. Falmouth has taken the lead and wants to do away with them. This is for all candidates. What are you going to do with these fertilizers? Are you going to try to ban them? If that's 10% of 10% is going to be the 10% of the total cost of whatever this project is going to be.
For the benefit of the whole, could you just simply define what you mean by commercial fertilizer so we all...
Okay, fertilizers that aren't cow manure, that are made
Okay, you mean private use, not...
private use. Well, you know, the town uses it too, but,
Okay.
you know, you buy it in the
So the
store.
question is, what are each of the candidates' plans with regard to the future use of commercial fertilizer
fertilizers.
as it
Now that
relates to
Falmouth is
wastewater?
trying
Okay.
to get rid of it.
Thank you. So, Mr. Fuller, Mr. Karen, Mr. McLennan.
I listened to the planning board talk about fertilizers while they were developing a bylaw, and that bylaw will come before you for a vote this spring. It is a reduction in the use of fertilizer, especially during certain times of the year. The problem we found with it is that, how do you enforce it? Can I go to a homeowner and say, by the way, you can't use fertilizer, and if you do, what happens? We haven't got that far yet. So this bylaw will be a beginning, and it's based on Falmouth's bylaw, to educate people on what fertilizers can do to the groundwater. And we hope that people on their own will begin to not use the fertilizers. If that doesn't seem to work, we'll have to amend that bylaw and put some kind of sanctions in it. We don't believe that the people of the town of Orleans need to be sanctioned all the time. They need to be given an opportunity to be educated and do something on their own. If it doesn't work, sanctions may be necessary. But fertilizer control is a bylaw that is on the warrant at this town meeting. Thank you, Karen.
Fertilizer, Mr. Cass, is to me just like moorings, except fertilizer is a proven producer of nitrogen. I think the approach of the planning board and what's being presented to town meeting is a great start. But I think Mr. Fuller has appropriately said that there's really no teeth in it. But I also think we have to kind of look at ourselves to see how many of us are going to go to a Cape Cod lawn. You know, it's funny, I did some work out in Arizona, and when they knew I was from Massachusetts, they said, we have a lot of people retiring to Arizona from Massachusetts. And I said, well, I think because a lot of them have allergies and that stuff. And they said, you know what they're bringing with them? They're bringing swimming pool and green grass. It's a culture change for us. But I think what's being proposed is a good start.
I support the proposed bylaw for fertilizer control with a couple of cautions. As you may or may not know, the Falmouth bylaw, like our bylaw, has to go to the Attorney General for approval under local regulatory process. It is being challenged by the commercial fertilizer people, so we don't know yet whether or not that bylaw will be accepted by the Attorney General to be used in Massachusetts. If it is rejected, our bylaw will become moot because it's an exact copy. I would also note that the Parks Department in Orleans has been using organic fertilizer for many, many years, and I think the town stood up and said, let's do it ourselves to set an example. And finally, I have a wonderful Cape Cod lawn. I hate to mow the lawn. I don't water it, and I don't have any fertilizer on it, and it gives me a lot of free time.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Bob Carruthers from South Orleans, and my question is for each of the candidates. As I drive around town here, I'm taken by gasoline stations that are vacant, storefronts that are unoccupied, restaurants that no longer are in business. I also read in the paper that 24 enterprises that wanted to operate businesses here or expand businesses have been constrained by wastewater matters. So my question is, if warrant Article 11 does not pass, what would each of you do? Do you agree that businesses need support? And if so, what form would that support take?
Mr. Karen, Mr. McClellan, and then Mr. McLennan, of course, and then Mr. Fuller, or Mick Fuller.
Mr. Carruthers, I mean, I think that's a very good question. And I think all of us have to look kind of hard at that. Earlier, I ran through 4 different properties that were being changed, and they're all restaurants. I happen not to agree that Orleans is dying. Matter of fact, I strongly disagree that Orleans is dying. What I see happening in Orleans is typical type of business. I think what the partnership group is doing is a great asset to downtown. But because we have a restaurant open, I'm as far as vacant, like the Saltwater Grill, some of that is business. Some of that is how some people can run a business. You know, if Guapos can, in a month, now start to go and triple their size, they must know how to run a good business. And I'll also say we must have a lot of beds in Orleans because we have a lot of mattress companies. And they're all still here. So something must be going right. But it's a tough question and it's a fair question.
Just a quick comment. If we do not go ahead with either 11 or 12, there is no money anywhere to do any more wastewater planning because there's nothing else in the warrant that allows you to appropriate money to do anything. So we'll be in exactly the position we were in, the board, it's not me, but the town was in January when they spent the last $9,000 to get the cost estimate for Phase 1A. And as I started off this evening, I talked about the capital planning process. And I think it's important to understand that under our charter, you really have to get things in the capital plan, and it works through year by year by year. There is nothing in the capital plan right now that says redo the CWMP. So effectively what happens, we wait for a year or two, and then we decide what the next step is. And when we do that, we are leading ourselves down a road where we have a CWMP that is no longer approved, we are then no longer eligible for zero interest loans, and we were back at square one. I don't think we should do that. This town is far too valuable to let that happen. Thank you.
Many of those businesses that have been talked about did not come to Orleans specifically because wastewater infrastructure was not available to them. It wasn't other reasons, business reasons, it was the wastewater issue. And I took that to heart when I tried to come up with this compromise, that if downtown businesses are going to be successful, if we're going to find complementary businesses to what we have down there now, make it more vibrant, wastewater infrastructure, or at least what kind of things we're going to do down there with wastewater, has to be taken care of. The plan I proposed is only a compromise and a beginning. You can't find out what goes on until we have an engineered plan, and in part of that RFP for that engineered plan will be to answer a lot of those questions you still have. What's under the road? Where are the water pipes? Are there underground utilities? All of those things would be answered by those bidding on that project. And that's why I have proposed and continue to propose the 1A plan. Thank you.
Yes, who?
Thanks, Mr. Moderator.
Before you do that, I just want to see if there's anybody else in the hall, because you have had a question. There isn't. Oh, yes, ma'am. I'll get back to you, Mr. Delaney. Yes?
Hi, I'm Mary Ellen Bradley from Orleans, and I, as a overburdened taxpayer, have not had the opportunity to vote on the proposed Fuller Plan. And I think that would be something that most of us taxpayers would like to have an opportunity to do. And my question is for Mr. Karen. I've heard a lot about the true cost of the draft CWMP being anywhere between $250 million to $500 million. But the warrant article, and I don't have it all memorized, is only for about $3.5 million. $3.5 million. So what does the $250 to $500 million represent for us overburdened taxpayers?
Mr. Karen, and then Mr. Fuller and Mr. McClellan.
Well, at town meeting and in the regular town meeting, you will see that in the special is the $3.5 million. 2 years later, there is the price that I think Weston and Sampson gave us of $32 million. That's the start of the 6 phases. Mr. Fuller's been pretty upfront saying that, that's his plan, but he's making it available for other boards if they want to enhance the present plant, the present plant, it will be modular, so it can be done that way. And that's why I said it's kind of like the Campbell getting his head under the tent. I think we need to have a full-blown plan, and I even remember Mr. McGrath at one of the selectmen's meetings saying that, if we bring this to town meeting, we need to make sure they know that what's phase 1 and what is the final phase. Because we're not just purchasing downtown. It's what happens after that. What are we buying? How big should that plant be if it's modular? What will we need to support it if it's X size? So to me, this is the start. This is the start of the plan. And again, Mr. McClellan has been very clear that he sees it as a plan, and everything is, we can't get CWMP if it fails, we can't get another DRI if it fails. I'm telling you, if we want to clean up waters, all of those agencies, state, federal, and county, will be right there to help us.
Well, I don't know where the $250 million price comes either. Is that if we were to sewer the entire town? I don't know. Weston and Sampson had told us that for what we planned, the 55% was about $145 million. Whether we did it with a gravity sewer or a septic tank effluent system, when you go from start to the end, including land acquisition and everything up to operation and maintenance. I don't know where this $250 million price tag comes from. I think it's somebody's imagination. We're not going to sewer the whole town. The plan does not call for sewering the whole downtown, or the whole town. So I don't know where that figure came from. Could it lead to $145 million? Or by the time we do it, probably more? Yes, it could. But we need to start somewhere. And once we start and get an idea of what's going on, and we can do further testing, we may find there are areas in, say, Part 7, Phase 6, or Phase 5 that we don't need to do. And then we would not spend the money on it.
Mary Ellen, I believe that $250 to $500 million came from somebody extrapolating what the town of Chatham was going to spend. I remember when it was published by someone from Chatham. The cold hard facts is that the number in our CWMP was $152 million to do 52% of the town of Orleans. And then that number was tested by Weston and Sampson with 2 alternatives, and they came in at $145 to $146 million 5 years later. That's a pretty good number. I think the thing that I want to emphasize, first of all, every single step or phase of this plan is going to be decided by you and the other voters of the town of Orleans. What we have before us right now is $3.5 million to find out what Phase 1A will cost. It'll take 2 years of engineering to do that, and then you will go out in the public bid process under Chapter 30B, which has to happen, and you will know when you open those envelopes what Phase 1A costs. The best current estimate, based on 3 different engineering estimates, Wright Pierce, Weston and Sampson, and Weston and Sampson again, is $31.5 million, including design costs. But having been through the public process many times with public construction, you don't know until you open the envelopes after they've been submitted. And there are many engineers sitting out here that nod their heads when they hear that. But they work hard to make sure that you're not surprised when you open the bid envelopes.
Mr. Delaney.
Thanks, Mr. Moderator. A lot of the public dialogue, unfortunately, has been polarized by this big pipe, small pipe diametric. And I'm wondering if I could ask a two-part question. What is the actual physical size in diameter inches between a big pipe and a small pipe? Perhaps Mr. Karen could start with that answer if he knows it. And the second part of the question is, with the candidate's comment, is it really that simplistic, or is it really the ultimate solution, a combination of a best use of technologies that can be combined?
So, all right. Panel understand the question? Mr. Karen, then, Mr. McClellan. I'll get it right yet, Mr. McClellan. And Mr. Fuller.
You know, it's a famous law firm. I don't know if you ever dealt with them.
No, I was thinking of the senator, actually.
Okay, right.
He did rackets.
Mr. Delaney, another good question. The small pipe, I believe, is a diameter of about 3 inches, and the big issue with that is that it can be put in by directional drilling without having to dig up. An issue has been made here about, well, what do we have underground? Can directional drilling be done here? I'll tell you, I see the gas company doing directional drilling all over town when they go and do and install it at a residential. On the big pipe, they can be all over the place. I mean, if it's just to serve downtown, it's one size. But if it's to serve downtown, but also then take, like, affluent from East Orleans and South Orleans, it has to be a bigger pipe. That's beyond my pay grade to answer that. I'll tell you what I think needs to be done. If I were elected, I would ask the board to immediately get all of us in a room, and I might even lock the door and throw the key away, and say, when we're ready with a solution that we all kind of agree on, that's best for Orleans, because the comment by Mr. McClellan that it can't go back to town meeting is not right. It can go back to town meeting, but it would require a much larger vote to get it. But it can be brought back to town meeting. You could have a special town meeting in the fall and have it done. So there are ways. I just want to make sure we don't make a big mistake.
Mr. Fuller?
Well, personally, I think the big pipe, small pipe thing is a misnomer. I think the pipes would be about the same size no matter what system you used. I asked Dr. Duncanson of the town of Chatham, what's the largest size pipe they use in Chatham? And Chatham plans on sewering the whole town, and they have a gravity system. And he told me the largest pipe we have is 8 inches. We don't have a city here of 1 million people. We don't need 16-inch mains. An 8-inch main would be fine for what other system? And you don't need 5, 6, 7-inch pipes coming out of the houses. They could be 3 or 4 inches for either type system. Would directional drilling be possible? It might be. We just don't know. We just don't know. And that's why I think that's a misnomer. I think either system would use approximately the same size pipes. And I don't remember the second part.
I don't either.
Mr. Delaney, you want to repeat the second part? What's the best combination of technology?
I think ultimately, is it not this one or the other solution, but isn't it a combination of best technologies?
All right.
And I think, yes.
You want an opportunity first?
No, you can take it.
As in Article 11, you'll see part of that money is put aside to look at a decentralized STE system for Meeting House Pond, look at it. In that is the implication that maybe a hybrid system is the way to go for Orleans. East Orleans is a lot less populated year-round than downtown. So maybe there isn't enough stuff there all year round to properly operate a plant. We don't know that. That's why we need to look at that pre-engineering to find out, is that the best solution there, or is it not? We don't know that answer yet. Could it be a hybrid system? It might be, or it could not.
Mr. McClendon?
Yeah, just very quickly, John is correct. I've had conversations in Chatham, and it's 8-inch pipe. They used directional boring in Chatham in certain places where they couldn't get equipment down between the houses that are placed pretty close together in downtown Chatham. The Weston and Sampson estimate for the 1A plan includes 8-inch pipes, and in fact, the 500 feet from basically West Road to Tri-Town will be a directional bore of an 8-inch pipe. That's shown in the plan, and it's costed out. If you go back and you look at the earlier sewer plan for downtown Orleans from 1983, the pipe sizes were 8 inches. So, and all of you should know that the pipe that goes out of your house is 4 inches. The septic effluent is 2 to 4 inches, depending on whether it's close to the house or a collector. So 2 to 8, big, small.
We have time for one more question. Yes, up there.
Jim Trainer, Orleans. I have a two-part question. One is, if the Cape Cod Commission just received $3 million to research the best way of cleaning the water on Cape Cod, why would we spend $3.5 million on Article 11, then wait 2 years to get the results for the cost? Wouldn't it be wiser to wait and let the Cape Cod Commission in every town on Cape Cod work for a solution? And secondly, it was stated earlier that if we don't go forward, we could be mandated to go forward by the state, federal government. Why would Orleans be singled out as the only town to move forward when the rest of the towns are in the same quandary? And so why would Orleans be forced to do something that no other town on Cape Cod is being forced to do right now?
So, Mr. McClellan, Mr. Cannon, I'll give you the first crack at that, and get your name wrong. Mr. McClendon, Mr. Karen, and Mr. Fuller on that, and that's the last question.
Yes, very quickly, the Cape Cod Commission approved our plan in 2011, and they used the same standards that they're going to use with their $3 million study. They looked at watersheds, and they tried to figure out the best way to treat the important places in those watersheds. And in fact, what the warrant Article 11, Phase 1A includes is downtown, which is the most cost-efficient place to sewer, and it's been that way for 30 years, and as Mr. Fuller has pointed out, Meeting House Pond as an alternative. That is absolutely consistent with what the Cape Cod Commission is talking about. And the second part of it, why would we be singled out? I have not said we would, Jim. My entire career has been spent being one step ahead of the regulators, doing things so that they can't come down with a hammer on you. And I'm not convinced that we would be in that situation here. I just don't know, because you never know what regulators are going to do, whether they're bankers or engineers or scientists. You don't know.
Mr. Karen?
Mr. Trainer, I think that question's on a lot of our minds. And I'm not sure if there's a simple answer to it. But I think what bothers me the most is that I believe that came out in early January from the county commissioners. And the two that were charged by the commissioners to look at this came back with a proposal And what concerns me is we have 4 representatives for Orleans at the county level. Number one, none of them brought this back to the Board of Selectmen. And the Board of Selectmen has never discussed it. Even to say, we're aware of it, we understand what they're trying to do, we have Phase 1A, but we're going to continue with 1A. We haven't even had that discussion. And I ask why. Everything else, we follow the county like they dictate to us. So now they send out something, and they're getting a $3 million grant and a letter from the governor on how to do it, and our board hasn't had a chance to discuss it, and we have 4 reps at the county level? I'm sorry, I just... That's why I think we have to open the dialogue. I think the voters are asking for that. I think the voters are really tired of all of us inside the circle fighting, and I think we all have to kind of take some time and for their sake, try and answer these questions for them. We'll get further if we do it.
Mr. Fuller?
Well, as I pointed out earlier, we did ask that question, and we got the letter back from Mr. Niedzwitzki saying that they're researching all of these different ways you can do stuff and recommending doing the best and cheapest way you can. But they did point out that we should continue with our approved CWMP and DRI, and I'll quote again, planning, design, and construction consistent with the CWMP DRI approval. We are farther along than some of those other places. Are we going to be forced to do it? Probably not, unless something like the conservation law firm decides that they're going to flex their muscle and Orleans is going to be the target. I doubt that also. I really do. But that's not a reason not to move forward. We need to get this underway and get started. Thank you.
It's late in the evening, but I ask you to turn off your cell phones. So we're going to have sum up now. 2 minutes each. The order, as determined from on high, is Mr. Fuller, Mr. Karen, and Mr. McLennan.
I really don't have a lot more to say to sum up. All through this entire discussion we've been having, I've been saying, I thought I'd stick my neck out. I thought I'd take a chance. I'd look at everybody's side and try to find some kind of compromise to move our wastewater planning to the design phase. It's all I'm asking of town meeting. I understand that there are other areas in town that need to be looked at. That's why we included the pre-design of Meeting House Pond, because some felt that that was one of the hot spots. I don't particularly agree with it. I think the Cedar Pond is more of a hot spot, but that's another issue. I stand by what I brought forth to the Board of Selectmen. Yes, we did not get a unanimous vote, but that's not the way government works. It's a majority. And a 3-2 majority supported going forward, having the testing done, and having some money put to the plan, which, as been mentioned, will be talked about in public on May 1st. Took a while to get the answers from Weston and Sampson. That's why it didn't come up earlier, but you'll have an opportunity to watch that and comment on that. Probably not at that meeting, though. I stand by what I said. I would ask for your vote. I considered not running again, but I would be doing you a disservice is to put this out in front of you and then walk away from it. I hope I can stand on my record. I hope I've been up front, out front, and transparent to you all, and I've made an honest attempt to let everybody have their opportunity to speak. Thank you very much.
At the very beginning of this, I thank the Citizens Forum and Mr. Landreth But I want to take just a second to thank all of you in this room. That's one of the good things about Orleans, is that we do care. And I also thank you for the questions that you offered and put to us. I think they were all well thought of, sincere, and I'm not sure whether we've answered or changed your mind, but I do appreciate the fact that you spent a nice, lovely night to come out to this. So in closing, I offer the following perspective. Let us not forget our current Tri-Town plant. That was paid with 90% of federal money. It was built too large, forcing us to join with Brewster and Eastham, and today, those three towns combined only produce 50% of what is needed to run that plant. A large compost shed was also built and has been sitting empty for well over 20 years because of poor engineering. Remember, big solutions usually bring big problems. We continually hear, let's do it now while the free money or the low interest rates are available. However, there comes a point when it is neither prudent nor affordable to do everything. This is when we need to prioritize and make our choices and start to talk with each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark and John, and all of the people that have been here this evening. This has been an exciting experience for me, and I hope that I've been able to show you my thought process, even though you may or may not like it. But anyways, that's the way I've done it all my life, and I think I've been reasonably successful in that process. There are a couple of things that I want to note, just to correct the record. It was suggested early on in this meeting that I had proposed a major taxing authority for Barnstable County. That is not true. It is not true. It was part of cyberbullying that was directed at me because of my role in the commission that looked at Barnstable County government. Basically what was said was that we needed to look at Cape Cod as an entity. And the only people that create more taxes on Cape Cod are the voters of Cape Cod. I did not suggest that. The second thing is, I am committed to doing whatever it takes to make sure that Orleans is a far better community than it is today before we lose our environment. And I believe that tomorrow, if you watch the Selectmen's meeting, you will see the actual costs for Phase 1A. And I think you will be somewhat surprised at what the annual cost is for houses of different sizes. I've looked at those numbers, and it's interesting to discover that if any one of those average houses, 250, 500,000, a million, or 2 million, experienced a valuation increase of 2.5% in the first year, the change would pay for the entire cost of Phase 1A to that taxpayer. Look at it tomorrow and come to your own conclusion. Those are the numbers I've done. I hope in closing that you will recognize what I have given and I intend to give to this town if I'm elected by you. I hope I am, and I will give the amount of time that it takes to do what is best for Orleans. And I really thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you for coming out. Thank you for your civility and your thought. Have a good evening, and don't forget town meeting.